Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Richard, today we're going to talk about the relationship between anxiety and goal setting, especially in the realm of sports psychology.
Right.
Because that is our topic for the week.
Right.
Sports psychology.
But, once again, as I was reading this, I was thinking, this is what happens to me when I do a presentation. You have that performance anxiety
right.
Just before you do it, but it gives you an edge, and it sharpens it, at least for me.
Yeah.
It sharpens my whole approach, my thinking, my organizational skills. So anxiety in different areas of your life can serve a positive function.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is an article written by Andy Lane, who happens to be the person we're going to interview later this week.
Right.
And he wrote an article entitled "How Anxiety Affects Your Goal Setting." And Andy is a sports psychologist in the UK, and he's done a lot of work in the
yes, his web. When you go to his website, it's very impressive output. But it was funny because he's from the UK, but he's headed on his way to New Zealand.
Right.
And it is summer in New Zealand.
It would be, yeah.
Right, and so I'm
sure he's going from very frigid,
cold
cold
it's
weather
cold in England right now.
Wolverhampton, that's where he's at. In England,
okay.
To New Zealand, yes.
To the sunny south for him. So yes, because it's summer in New Zealand right now.
So when we think about anxiety as it relates to goal setting, there's a few things, and not just goal setting, but how well we're performing.
Performance
and what we're going to do
in general, right.
How well we anticipate doing, and that type of goal setting. Not necessarily the goal setting that when we typically talk about goals, we're thinking, in 6 months I want to be doing this or want to be doing that, but more goal setting as it relates to, this is how fast I want to run this, this 5K, or this is how well I want to perform in this competition today. And in this article, he talks about this relationship. And as you said just before we started recording, it's a very interesting dynamic that really we have to sort of think about. Maybe makes us think about things a little bit differently.
It did, yeah. This is a bit of a different approach that he takes to these two topics: the role that anxiety plays in performance.
Right.
We typically think of the standard way of thinking about anxiety is that a little bit of anxiety is okay, but you reach a point where it becomes maladaptive, or it has a negative effect.
Right.
And he takes a little more, I would say, sophisticated. That's a rather simplistic view of anxiety. And he takes a bit more sophisticated approach to the relationship between anxiety and achieving your goal.
Yeah, because we often talk about and you have a fancy name for it, the inverted U.
Oh, yes.
Dodson's or something like that. Dachshund.
Yerkes Dodson law.
I knew Dodson was in there somewhere.
Yeah, Yerkes Dodson law.
But it's an inverted U, so it's an upside down U that says that when your anxiety is very low, your performance is not very high either, because if you don't really care,
that's right. That's the point he makes. Is that if you really care about something, you're going to be a little nervous.
Right.
Okay. If you didn't care, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't feel anything.
Right. Okay. So as your anxiety increases, your performance increases.
That's right.
And it reaches a point where it says, okay, now this is your maximum output anxiety ratio.
Right.
So your anxiety is going to reach a point where you're going to be at your best.
Right. But if you are a little too anxious, then your performance
starts to go back down.
Decline.
Right.
Exactly.
And so that's why it's sort of an inverted U, because it goes up as your anxiety goes up, but then it reaches a threshold where your performance then starts going back down.
But his research adds little pieces to that I had never thought about, that I didn't know about before until I read his work.
Yeah. And so the sort of the short story of what his says is that, sometimes pushing yourself and increasing that anxiety level a little bit higher than what we would typically may be good.
May be good for you.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It may make you work harder. And I think of the idea of setting ambitious goals.
Right.
You know, we talk about setting ambitious goals that are that push you to a limit, but that you can still achieve, but that push you to that limit.
Right. And when in tennis, we always tell all of my children played, but most recently I have a girl, one of my daughters is playing, and we always tell her, play with better players who are better than you, or play with men, because they hit harder. Men generally hit harder than women, and that raises your game when you're competing again. But it's that way in every sport.
Right.
You know, play with people better than you,
right,
and they will increase your performance.
Right. Now, I tried to find it, but I was listening to a program the other day, and I just could not put it in draw from my memory bank if it was a documentary I was watching or if it was a podcast I was listening to, but one or the other. So I couldn't find it again, but the person there was talking about when setting goals and said that, you know, the idea is that sometimes you want to set goals that are just above what you can reach. That there are times when you want your goals to be just out of your reach,
right?
So that not so high that you know that it's impossible, but high enough to where you're going to continue to work until the very end to try to get to that goal. Right. And even if you don't quite reach it, that's okay.
That's right.
That's pretty consistent with what he's talking about here.
That's right. The idea that I think of running.
Right.
You know, running a marathon.
Running is a good example.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you say, okay, I'm going to set my goal to run a marathon. Well, okay, you only made a half marathon. Mm-hmm. You just ran 13 miles. Right. There aren't many people who can do that.
Right.
Okay, so even if you only get halfway there, it's still an enormous accomplishment.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when you think about that, and if we apply it to running, let's say running a mile.
Right.
And let's say that you typically run, let's just say an 8-minute mile.
8-minute mile. Right.
You know, you may set your goal to run just using round numbers, you may set your goal to run a 7.5-minute mile.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, all you're doing is you're talking about shaving 30 seconds off, and it seems reasonable.
Seems easy
until you're running, and of course that's really difficult.
Right.
But so that would be an ambitious goal that may be just outside of your reach, but it's going to help you get faster.
It's going to spur you to that next level.
You would not, however, say, I want to run a 5-minute mile, because that is so far outside of your reach that you know that you will know after the first lap, there's no way I can make that. And so that's going to affect your performance negatively,
right,
because you know that there's no way that you're going to reach it.
I had a friend who was he was good. He was a very good runner. He would run 10 miles in the morning and 10 miles in the afternoon. And so he was in excellent condition. And he tried to run a 5-minute mile one time. He said he could come nowhere close. He said, I don't understand the physiology of a 5-minute mile, because he said, you're running as fast as you can for a mile. Right. And it's very, very difficult to do. Yeah. So, that's what did it for me. When he said that, I thought, there's no way. Because you'd have to train for years to be able to get to that point. Right.
So when you're setting goals, you want to elevate your anxiety to the point where it's going to push you and encourage you to do more and to be faster and stronger and better. But you don't want to set it so high that it's going to be a detriment to your performance, because you just know there's just no way.
Right. The other thing I like about his whole approach is he talks about process goals, right? Right. And I really... When I got to that section, I really piqued my interest, because we tend to think of achievement goals, where I want to be. Right. And he said that sometimes that's misplaced. Right. He said maybe you ought to shift to the process you're using, and get better at that. And I remember when I was running every day, there would be days when you run enough, when you're very sluggish.
Right.
Okay. And what I would do in those days is I would start to concentrate on just how I was moving, and I would reestablish a rhythm that worked for me that day, because otherwise you feel like you're running with blocks on your feet.
Right.
And so I did that. But he talks very eloquently about focusing on the process rather than the goal.
Yes. Yeah. He says when you do so, the person switches, and this is what he writes. The person switches attention from what the likely outcome could be, and all of the emotions that come with that, to the requirements of doing the task itself.
Of doing the task.
And yes, I really like that, because when it comes again to sport psychology, when it comes to performance, sometimes the process is more important than the outcome.
Well, and we say that with tennis players, and I'm sure you do it with soccer players, is you can tell when a player is starting to fall apart.
Right.
Okay. And you say, just focus on your movements.
Right.
We refer to it as the neuropsychology of sport, where you just go back and just focus on we always focus on the fundamentals.
Right.
Go back and just remember what your coach told you, where you put your feet, how you swing the racket, and go back to those basic fundamentals, because that's what's broken down. What I love about this is that it gives coaches a very specific way to correct performance. And that, because that's kind of what we do anyway.
Right.
I just hadn't heard it explained quite this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when we think about the utility of this for athletes, or maybe even more specifically for non-athletes, it's really a great suggestion, I think, to say practice or focus on non-outcome goals.
That's right.
Focus on goals that don't necessarily have to do with the end product, but it focuses on the process that you're going through. And so whether you're trying to write a blog, and when you're writing a blog, you're going to think, I want my blog to be popular, I want it to get lots of clicks and likes and followers and all this. But sometimes you just have to focus on the process of writing.
That's right.
Getting words to the paper so that then you can get to the outcome goals later on.
That's right. In baseball, we think about hitting the ball, and then we have to say to the batter, just focus on where your hands are and where your arms are. Focus on your swing. The hitting will take care of itself if you go back and just think about what you're supposed to, fundamentals of where your hands and arms are.
Right. Yeah. So this article offers a lot of good information.
It really does.
Not just the idea of how you set your goals and how high to set your goals, but also what type of goals you need to be setting. So,
and the other thing that I liked about this, he said, accept anxiety as a normal part. And again, no matter whether you're writing, presenting, performing, and it doesn't matter what level, just accept anxiety as part of it, and use the anxiety in constructive and positive ways. It needn't get in the way of your performance.
Absolutely.
But accept it as normal. And we talk about that a lot in other areas too, that just accept these feelings as normal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right.
Very
good
advice.
It for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid. Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patron.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.